Story time. When I was probably 14 or 15 years old, my mom wanted a fire pit. And the agreement was that if I built her a fire pit, she would buy me an iPod. I think it's like an iPod 4, I'm not really sure. It's like the first touchscreen iPod. I've always liked filming stuff and filming hunting, things like that. Never could afford the equipment to do it with up until now. But I would take that iPod with us up to the farm that we lease up in Harrison County. And I want to say I was probably 14 or 15, so we're talking like upwards of 11 to 10, something like that, years ago. And I would always shoot at squirrels if I got the opportunity to do so. I would shoot anything that walked in front of me with my bow because I wanted practice. And I shot this old Matthews. I don't even know what that thing was. It was like axle to axle, 70 inches. It was probably 40 inches axle to axle. The draw length was too long. When I drew it back, like if I didn't hold it just right, the string would be down here touching my left pec. It was a mess. Going back to the fact that I didn't have much money. Dad, he takes us to Walmart. Back there at the hunting section, you could get broadheads. They had like Grizzly something. I can't remember all the makes and models, but these things were like Allen brand, so like the crappiest of the crappy. If you shoot that, that's fine, but that's all we had at the time. We had like little 85 grain aluminum junk broadheads from Walmart. And I was target practicing with one. So I draw it back and I shoot it through the target. Well, back then I was punching it through the target. But I shoot it, it goes through the target and hits the ground on the other side and just mangled up the blades and blew them off of there. Now that specific broadhead, I had like 2 left and then one of them had no blades on it. And I was like, I'll just shoot it, see if it still hits good. Back at 20 yards, it was still hitting really good. I put that into my quiver for a squirrel arrow. That way, you know, if a squirrel comes out, I can shoot at it, whatever. And I would shoot at them as often as I could, always shooting at squirrels with a bow and arrow. And there was this tree stand called the Tater Chip, and it's just a regular old, you know it and you love it, 2-man ladder stand with no padding on the seat, nothing like that. So it's just butt bone directly to steel seat. They were terrible. I hadn't seen any deer that morning, and up at the farm was me, Hogan, and Steven. I see these 2 huge fox squirrels coming down a tree. I'm like, alright, here we go. I'm going to shoot at one of these things if I get the opportunity. So they come down right there in that spot. It's like a little clearing and mostly hardwoods, and around you is all more hardwoods. They come down and they start crossing that clearing. I reach over to my quiver and I pop out the squirrel arrow, take out the deer arrow, set it to the side, put the squirrel arrow in. One of them branches off and goes away from me. The other gets on this little hickory tree that's about the size of a basketball or so, and he climbs up it to about 6 foot of height, and there's a limb on that thing that's pointing straight up at me from his tree that he's on. He gets on that limb like this, and he's looking up in the tree at me, just going, meh, 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 and his tail's shaking back behind him. I slowly stand up, I ease my bow up, and he's still just relentlessly going, yeah, screaming at me. So I draw my bow back, and like I said, he's pointing like straight at me. So I'm aiming right at his face. I get it on him, I hit the trigger, my arrow takes off, and the arrow comes in like this, straight at his face, and hits him and like pins his head to the tree. So he's just like in an instant, bam, just, and he's hanging there like this from like his face, and his arms and legs are all limp down below him. He's just sitting there. I'm up in the tree kind of celebrating. I think that was the first squirrel I ever killed with my bow, and I was like, sweet, it's awesome. I put my deer arrow back in there and I'll be ready if a deer comes out. I sat back down and got my bow all rigged up. My bow's sitting up on like the corner frame of the tree stand. And earlier, like an hour before that, I'd seen something over the hill. I wasn't sure what it was, kind of looked like a squirrel, something like that. And I thought I seen it lay down even. And that had left my mind. So now back to the squirrel. I'm scanning the woods looking for deer. I scan back towards him and I look at him. And instead of sitting there hanging like this, limp, the dude's got an arm up on the arrow. And I was like, maybe that was there. No, nothing to it. That's just the way it happened when I shot him. I go back to scanning. I'm scanning. I get back to scanning this way, and I look back at the squirrel. And the thing's not sitting there with one arm on no more. He's got both of them up there like this, hanging onto the arrow. His legs and tail, everything's limp below him. And the dude's just hanging there in like pull-up position. And I was like, now I know he didn't have both hands up there. I was like, that thing's still alive. And he's kind of wiggling, starting to move around a little bit while he's holding that arrow. The dude's hanging there by his nose from the arrow poking through it. And I was just thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to shoot him with the good arrow? Then I'll be down to one broadhead left. I was like, I need to just get down and go over there and kill him with my pocket knife or something, or bash him in the head with a stick. About that time, while I was thinking those thoughts, that thing starts raising mortal Cain, flipping out on that arrow, going like, no! Doing the squirrel sound and running, like pulling at the arrow, trying to rip his face off of it. And I was just sitting there in awe, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And about that time, I start hearing something run, that same area where I seen something earlier. And here comes a gray fox boogieing up the trail straight towards that squirrel. And he gets under the squirrel, hanging there, go like having an aneurysm, flipping out on that arrow. And the fox is just looking up at him, like trying to figure out, like thinking, what's the deal here? How am I gonna get this squirrel? I'm gonna eat him, you know? I gotta shoot the fox now. So I grab my bow and I stand up, and the squirrel is making so much noise, the fox is just locked on him like this. I stand up, I draw my bow back, and the fox had just like come down off of his back feet and put his front feet down. I don't know if he was about to jump up and grab him or what. He was standing like broadside to me, so I put my pin right on his heart, hit the trigger, and the arrow goes like, hits the fox. The fox makes like 3 bounds. He just boom, 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 and then dead. And I was sitting in the tree like, and I don't think I'd ever killed anything with my bow yet at this point. So here it was, first 2 kills with the bow, just one right after another. I've got a gray fox, which nobody even hardly sees up there very much, so it's pretty rare. A huge fox squirrel with an arrow stuck right through his nose, hanging on the tree, raising an absolute mortal conniption down there on that arrow. And then it starts thundering. I start hearing like, and it would come this way, and started getting really gray and dark outside. And I was like, this squirrel is summoning up Lucifer himself. So I climb down the tree. I walk over to the squirrel, and he's up about eye level somewhere like in this area from me standing up. And I got my knife out, and I feel horrible, but I was a moron at the time. I get my pocket knife out and open it, and I just went and jabbed the squirrel. It didn't do anything. I get an arrow out, and I just poke him and pin him to the tree to take him out of his misery. And the tip of that arrow was so jammed into the tree that there was no way I could get it out. So instead of just like trying to jack it out of there and pull it, I just twisted the arrow loose, and that broadhead tip is still in that tree to this day, like 11 or 12 years later. It's still crammed up there in that thing. So I grabbed the squirrel on the arrow, and I throw him like over my shoulder, and I grabbed the fox and my bow, and I was like, we're about to die from this storm. I'm gonna go get Hogan. Hogan's hunting, like I said, right around the corner. So I walk out the road, turn to the left, and I look up into the area where he's hunting at. And I see Hogan standing up there, like this. He's standing up there with his bow, looking this way from where you guys are right now. And he's just like walking. Back to me, I'm like, psst, psst, dude, trying to flag him down. And he goes, looks over at me, he's just like, and he takes off walking again. There's no deer, no animal alive that's worth getting us both thunderstruck and dead. So I'm just thinking, dude, let's get out of here. He just keeps sneaking forever. It seemed like 2 days that I sat there and watched him, which in reality it was probably only about 5 minutes, maybe more like 2. And the whole time he's doing this, I mean, the god-awfulest thunderstorm is brewing right above our heads. It's just like black and making these sounds that I imagine what hell sounds like. It's doing freaky stuff. I keep looking at Hogan. Hogan, he starts to draw his bow back. He's like right here, halfway drew back. And then I'm like, okay, here we go. He's gonna shoot so we can get out of here. And then he lets it back down. He'd walk a little bit, start to draw it back again, and then he'd let it back down. And finally, the dude comes to full draw. So I'm standing here. Hogan's like 40 yards in front of me, and I hear the deer he's looking at over here, but I can't see him. Probably only 30 yards away from me, right over the bank. Finally, he shoots, and it was the coolest sound ever. You just hear like, and then boom, of it going through that deer's chest, and I hear like, and it's coming around, and it's coming straight at me, and the deer like jumps across the road and just piles up. probably 5 yards away from me. And I looked at Hogan, I was like, get out of here, dude, come on. And I grabbed the deer and I took off running down the trail with the deer, slung it on the four-wheeler. We maybe put like a rope around it or something and boogied out of there. About halfway out of on the trail, we get to this spot to where it kind of opens up, and right when it opened up, man, the rain just started hammering us, and it's like striking thunder. And we make it back up there to the old barn where we used to have a pop-up camper under. We get to it and we walk up, we drive the four-wheeler straight under it. We tied the deer, because I've got a picture on one of my old phones, but we tied the deer to the four-wheeler and drug it out. And we just fly up under that slip, like the shed sticking off that barn, and get off, and just started celebrating and laughing our butts off. It was hilarious. It was probably, I don't even think me and Hogan spoke the whole time riding out of there, because we was both waiting for a lightning bolt to go through our skulls. Here is the footage. Bear with me, because I'm 14 years old here. I'm stupid, and I think I say this is wicked like a moron, man. It's so funny. This is wicked. Well, a fox and a fox squirrel. They're both dead. Alright, y'all. Thank you for watching this. Like I said, this is the first story I've ever sat down and told on camera, but I figured I might as well immortalize it. If you ended up liking it, let me know. I've got a ton of them. Hogan's got a ton of stories. Steven, Dad. I know people would like to see Dad tell some of his stories. If you want me to do more of these, let me know. I'll do some more.